Hi folks, Pat Healey here from the Laker News. I'm here with the NDP Leader Claudia Chender at Out of the Blue Artisan Market above Cup of Soul Cafe in Amsdale. So, welcome to Amsdale.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, legislature coming up soon, right?
That's right. On March 21st, we're going back in.
Okay, so it's going to be a busy time?
It's going to be very busy. It's a budget session, so the government will bring in a budget, and we'll get to see what the priorities of the Houston government are, and we get to ask questions from the ministers about those priorities and about what's getting funded and what isn't.
Few questions here for you. So, what motivated you to put yourself out there and run for politics, to want to become the leader of the NDP in Nova Scotia?
Well, I think in both cases it was really my children. So I have 3 children, and I wanted to be a role model for them, and I wanted to be able to make sure that they had the opportunities that I thought that they deserved, and that they were able to be in a province that had the education and healthcare and justice systems that they deserved. And so I wanted to be a part of the change I wanted to see, and so I put my name forward.
If you were premier, what would you do to fix the healthcare system?
Well, I think it's a huge task to fix the healthcare system, but I've spent today here in East Hants talking to folks like the Family Resource Center. We'll be talking to the food bank, and so we know that the upstream providers who are working on the front lines need more support. Every time you can reach someone before they're in any kind of healthcare crisis, it's better for people, and it's better for the system, and it's better for the finances of the province. And to that end, we also believe that family medicine needs to be a priority. So the doctor waitlist is growing and growing. We should see the numbers today or tomorrow, but the latest numbers are 133,000 Nova Scotians. That's 1 in 10, some places, I think closer to 1 in 12 Nova Scotians without access to primary care. We absolutely believe that should be the government's first priority. We should have family health homes where every Nova Scotian has a doctor's office that they can go to, and they can see a health professional when they need to. That will save the stress on our emergency rooms, on our paramedics, and on all of the other parts of our system that are really struggling right now.
Why did you come to visit Amsdale today?
Well, I've been traveling all across the province, so I became the leader of the party in June, and since then I've spent as much time on the road as off, and I believe that you can't really understand what's going on in the province unless you've had conversations and been in communities. We all have certain issues that are the same, like healthcare, for example, the cost of living, housing, but those show up in really different ways in different communities. So I'm doing my best to get to as many places as possible, and today it's East Hants.
Now, the next question is kind of electrifying, I guess you would say. Power rates.
Yes.
What would you do to ensure affordable power rates for Nova Scotians if you were premier?
Well, our focus that's a complicated question. Our focus is really on bills. So the point is, what people really care about is how much is on my bill. And part of that is about the rate, and part of that is about how much power your household uses. So we think we need to continue to really ramp up efficiency programs so we're using as little power as possible. That's part of it. But the other thing, of course, is that we have a private company with a monopoly that's very profitable, that is really in charge of all the power in Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia Power. And we believe that they need to be regulated differently. So they are independently regulated, but we write that law. We write that legislation that regulates them. We think they should be regulated based on performance, not just based on providing power. So Nova Scotians want power that is affordable. They want power that's reliable, which we all know is not really the case right now. And they want power that's green, that's better for the earth than the coal that makes up a huge part of our power mix right now. We think that we can get there through regulation, that we can regulate them differently, so that they are required to provide, affordable, green, and reliable power. And we've put forward legislation to do that.
Is that one of the topics you'll keep on the government coming up?
Well, absolutely, because the government made a big show of kind of going up against Nova Scotia Power with legislation, but it didn't make a difference. In the end, all the rates went up. People are still struggling to pay their bills, so there's much more work to be done on that file.
Do you have any concerns with the government's approach to not reinstating any restrictions or masking as it relates to COVID-19, with the number of deaths from it weekly still relatively high? If yes, what are those concerns?
Yeah, well, I think that the way in which the COVID restriction ended not long after Tim Houston's election was really mismanagement by government. We had a plan with public health to step down restrictions that I believe most Nova Scotians had gone along with, and with almost no warning, this government just kind of pulled the rug out from under all of those restrictions and declared the pandemic over, when we know that that's not the case. So we know that there are a lot of people still masking, but I think right now, we are hearing increasingly about the lack of availability of vaccines. That's a real problem. So there are some vaccine clinics, but for instance, like I'm the mother of 3, they're all during school and work hours. So how are children supposed to get vaccinated? We know right now that we are the kind of requisite distance out from the last campaign, that there are elderly Nova Scotians that should be eligible for boosters. Those boosters aren't available yet. So we definitely want to see the government take a much more proactive approach. From that perspective, there's also a lot of work to do with ventilation and safety in our public spaces. So I think in schools and other public facilities, there's a lot the government could do to just make sure that the air is clean and circulating. That will help with COVID, and that will help with a lot of other things. And lastly, we know that COVID is still a strain on our hospitals. And so for that and so many other reasons, we need to work so hard to retain the healthcare workers we have and make sure those hospitals and emergency rooms stay open so that they can help Nova Scotians who are suffering from, adverse healthcare.
Affordable housing. If you were Premier, what would you do to ensure affordable housing for all people so people wouldn't be on the brink of homelessness?
Well, I think I would do just about the opposite of what this government has done. So when this government came in and decided that they wanted to take action in housing, what the Premier said was, the solution to the housing crisis is to build housing. And we know that for people who are in housing crisis, so for people who are housing insecure, whether they're homeless or couch surfing or staying with someone or on a fixed term lease about to get kicked out, which looks different and really different in different places, those folks aren't going to be solved by all the condos being built all around HRM. That can only be solved through non-market housing. So that's public housing, co-op housing, nonprofit housing. We need a massive investment in that because market housing is not affordable. It's not generally affordable, but it's really not affordable right now. So what we would do is put that massive investment in. We would, the rent cap is scheduled to come off in December, which everyone is very concerned about. For years, we have promoted the idea of a sensible system of rent control like they have in most of the rest of the country. We think that's the only way out of the rent cap so that prices can rise slowly and in a way that we can anticipate. We know that landlords are having a hard time covering their costs, but we also know that we're going to be facing mass homelessness, really, if that rent cap comes off with nothing else behind it. So I think huge investment in social housing, in non-market housing, and a system of rent control are going to get us a lot of the way towards solving the housing insecurity that we're seeing.
And I know you being up in East Hands today, you've probably seen some of the developments going on here as well.
Yeah, and development's happening everywhere. And the reality is we do have a housing shortage at every end of the spectrum. So I'm not suggesting that all the development happening doesn't need to happen. A lot of it does, but we also need a lot of non-market housing, and that's where government comes in, right? The private sector can build housing. That's what they're designed to do, but only the government can provide social housing, and we need to see a lot more action on that file.
Okay. What would your message be to young women out there who are hesitant about putting themselves out there in the political world, especially with all the rhetoric that's online?
Well, for me, I have 2 young daughters, and it's really important for them to understand that women can do anything, and that in fact women can make decisions as well as men can, and oftentimes better. I met with Girl Guides last night, a troop of embers who are 7 years old, and we had this same conversation, you know, and they were talking about gender and saying, what would you change? And they said, we would make it so that there are just as many girl superheroes as boy superheroes, right? We still have a representation issue when it comes to women in leadership and gender diverse people. And I think, you know, I would say if you have the drive, if you have the calling to do that work, if you want to be of public service and you think you're up for it, I would encourage anyone to do it.
All right. The election isn't until 2025. So what is the NDP's plan between now and then to gain Nova Scotians' confidence so when it's time to go to the polls, the NDP could become successful?
Well, I think what we're doing, which is traveling around the province, talking to people, understanding the challenges that people and communities face and the opportunities in those places, and putting forward a reliable plan that people can trust to know that we can really build a better Nova Scotia, and we can build a better Nova Scotia for everyone. So I think what we've seen for a long time and what we're seeing right now is some people benefiting and some people suffering. And it's really our belief that we can make life better for everyone. And so we are finding out what those solutions look like on the ground and having that conversation.
All right. Thank you very much, NDP leader Claudia Chender, for making time out of your busy schedule for us today. Thank you to the Cup of Soul Cafe for allowing us to do the interview up at Outta the Blue Artisan Market. And thank you to the video story sponsor, Lino Stop Shop, for sponsoring this video story. Pat Healey for the Laker News in Emsdale.